everyone to the very first virtual coffee break at Impact House. This is literally my house, and you are kind of visiting me at this time. I hope you grabbed a nice warm cup of tea or coffee, and because we have a very good and very important topic to discuss today. The topic today is the business case of sustainability. I am Kristine Nagle, the founder and sustainability advisor at Impact House, and I help fast-growing tech companies launch sustainability strategy that supports business goals. And today's guest is Lubomila Jordanova. She's the founder and CEO of PlanA. PlanA is a Berlin-based startup developing an end-to-end platform that enables companies to measure, monitor, and reduce their environmental footprint and improve their ESG performance. I remember meeting Lubomila for the first time back in Helsinki when real events were still a thing at a slush conference, and we were sitting on a side of a sandbox, almost on the floor, and chatting about the future of sustainability and the amazing product that she's building. And I was immediately impressed by the simplicity of the solution to such a complex problem. Anyhow, Lubomila, please welcome, this is a short welcome to you here, and please give an introduction to what you are doing and why.
Absolutely, yeah. It's really a great pleasure to be here, Christina. It's been a while since we physically met, even though we've been in touch quite a lot in an online format. I kind of miss this physical opportunity for interaction because there was a lot of things we could learn from each other in a more serendipitous manner. A bit about me. My name is Lubomila. I'm the CEO and co-founder of PlanA. PlanA is, as explained, a software as a service platform that enables large companies or fast-scaling startups to monitor their carbon accounting as well as ESG performance and learn how to improve it. We work with big banks such as Societe Generale, funds such as Albion, venture capital, private equity funds, and also with a lot of interesting companies in the e-mobility as well as finance space. And we've been doing this for the last 5 years. So we started a bit before the big wave of sustainability discussions.
That's very cool. I actually was watching one of your TED Talks when preparing for this conversation and snooping for the best topics to pick your brain on. And you were mentioning that when you were starting out on this journey, which, as you mentioned, is like 5 years ago, you started with talking to more than 300 people to hear their opinions about climate change. And that now we don't really talk about opinions, we look at that data and science. Can you share from this whole journey how you see the conversation has changed?
Well, just maybe to give context before I start talking about the shift we've been going through. Essentially, what happened in 2016 was that I got obsessed with the topic of sustainability and climate change and spent a whole year educating myself about it, but also asking others about their opinion because this was the time when there was still a lot of opinions. And at that time, people were so disengaged. I was living in London and there was barely anyone interested in really this. And everyone kind of told me that this is a topic that could be covered by an NGO or something like that. Thank God this has changed a lot. It took a lot of convincing, not only on my side, but on the side of many others, to really explain why this is a topic that is essentially going to be driving our economy going forward. And from today's perspective, what I can definitely say is that thanks to COVID, we have had a really big push on a political, but also on a corporate level in making sustainability a core element of the strategy of a company, and essentially starting to dedicate a lot of more resources to that. It's not only money, but it's also people. It's also willingness to collaborate with other organizations, which makes me really happy because if I have to speak about what we went through since 2016, definitely the first 3 years was a bit more of a preaching rather than selling, because there was just way too much for people to be explained before you could even start talking about a product that is solving the problem related to climate change for their company.
Wow. I imagine you had to have many, many very complicated conversations about why climate change really is a scientific and proven thing. Thank God that it's changing, or thank science. You choose. I think the biggest shift in conversation quite recently has been the fact, at least in the EU, that we have new regulations coming in, the new Green Deal, and as an extension of that, EU taxonomy. So if you're looking at, if you Google it up and look more into it, you will see that actually it's a document that lists the sustainable activities and the unsustainable activities. And it basically breaks down that in the next 10 years, all the financial institutions from EU to banks to investment agencies will prefer to work with companies that are sustainable. And I think that is the biggest argument, at least in the last couple of years, that has been coming into the conversation that really makes it a business argument. Because if you will need to work with any of these organizations, you will need at least basic understanding of the subject. Anyhow, there's so much to learn about the subject, and let's move forward and discuss and unravel it further. 2020 definitely could go into the history books as the year of bold commitments from corporations. Of course, it's inspiring to see companies like Shopify or Amazon make bold statements and commit to doing the right thing. But there is a huge debate of how to actually reach those goals. And of course, there is a risk for these companies to get a pushback from society for not doing enough. Lubomila, I want to hear your thoughts. What do you say are the benefits for companies who actually publicly commit to taking action on climate change?
The benefits are so many, and I hope that in the audience there's an understanding of the importance of sustainability. But if I have to list a few, I definitely would say increased profits. There's a lot of data that shows that if you to launch a sustainable line as part of your products, it grows at 25% faster than others. That was data from the EU. They did a very interesting experiment over the last 2 years. There's also another economically maybe driven reason why you should put money into it is because companies that have a high ESG performance have been also historically proven to give better returns. So again, you kind of working around the fact that the whole system starts organizing itself around the fact that you're doing something sustainable, and that leads to both basically increasing the value of your company. Another reason is because your employees care. There's actually a lot of data that we have gathered as a company, but also a lot of internationally conducted research that proves that employees have put as a highest priority. There was a survey that interviewed more than 1 million people from all over the world, which was asking essentially what is the reason why they would switch a company or choose to work for a certain company, and sustainability level was the highest performing reason. And then final, which is quite important element, which is obviously related again to your financial returns, is your customers. There is a lot of awareness in Europe, and maybe we're not the only continent, but definitely the one that is leading the way in terms of sustainability. And if anyone that is listening is based here, they need to start caring about sustainability and talking about their transition towards building a more sustainable model by engaging their customers as well. And it doesn't mean that you need to overnight calculate your carbon footprint and then compensate and do like thousands of things. Actually, it's more about taking a journey of reduction. Because as we know, science has proven that it's not about your compensation. Offsetting is not going to save humanity or get the planet to be healthier. It's actually carbon reduction that it needs to get us there. So if these 4 reasons are, I guess not enough, there's plenty more, but probably the most important one being that our planet needs a lot of care at this stage. But focusing first maybe on what economically matters, this is, I guess, a good starting point.
Exactly. For a change to happen in many companies, I think there has to be a very good business reason. And the goal of this conversation is to bring them out. So if there is a better strategy, how to earn more, attract A game employees, and save money, I'm very curious to hear about it. But so far, it's sustainability. And I can't wait to see many companies taking many steps in that direction. But yeah, I bet there are many people in the audience who are maybe now, after the list of benefits, or maybe already before, considering sustainability and getting like starting out on this journey. From your experience working with many companies with PlanA and also in previous career, what are the things that you would suggest companies take into account when starting to work on sustainability? And maybe there's something we can already learn from others to avoid those mistakes.
The most important thing when you start your sustainability strategy is to understand that it's a journey. It's something that takes a lot of different small steps in order for it to be achieved. And any of these overnight claims of sustainability just to be doubted, because it does not take for you to outsource your sustainability responsibility, something that needs to be integrated in the way the company is managed. With this in mind, what small things you need to take into account is that there's first layer of changes you can introduce on an internal company level, which immediately can have impact and also can immediately be implemented. That's a good starting point where maybe you introduce a recycling scheme in your office. Maybe you think of a better way for your employees to get to the office. Maybe you introduce a work from home policy that allows for people to not be constantly stuck on public transport or in a car to get to their office. The second layer would be the one related to your product. This is where majority of the emissions are hidden. And this is where you can start looking into alternative packaging, alternative sourcing of raw materials, or if you're building a software product, green energy providers and so on. And then once you get to that level, there you can start thinking about these bold and more dramatic changes that happen in the company where the whole mindset is reshuffled. Actually, what really often happens is that when you introduce these cosmetic changes, the mindset is already starting to shift. But once you move to this second and third stage, you really need to be focusing on kind of even more outward kind of facing ways of communicating this. Bottom line, it's really important to understand that sustainability is a journey. It's something that is a process, and it's not going to happen overnight. And you might need some external help, be it for someone like Kristine, be it from someone like PlanA, be it from an online blog to start with, where you're learning about what are the top tips to kick off your sustainability agenda. We have plenty of those on the PlanA Academy. You can find online. And once this is done, then you move to the more complex stage where you're really kind of deeply embedding sustainability into the way the company operates. And that's the exciting moment when you're going to start seeing the results of the small things you've implemented and you've started with, because the employees are going to be the driving force behind this shift. And also the people that are on your customer base are going to be the ones that are championing your achievements and your steps.
Yeah, for sure. I'm also kind of just to add on top of this, thinking that one of the biggest challenges many companies are facing, especially early on when developing and just taking those first steps, is yes, not understanding that saying that sustainability is a journey, but also understanding that you need to allocate enough resources on the team for executing sustainability projects. It can happen that sustainability is this side project of one employee who feels passionate about climate change, or maybe feels passionate about diversity or equity and inclusion, and in that case, the project will only be as successful as that employee can do in their free time, because it's not included in their actual KPIs and goals. And when the real projects come in, they don't have any time or resources to deal with these things. It is it is better than nothing, of course, but this can lead to a major damage to the whole project's reputation, because once you start building momentum of sustainability, people are expecting that you're going to actually do something. And where everything just relies on one person or just a couple of people who are doing it just as a passion project, it really can end up not delivering the results that you actually need. And another thing that I can share from my own experience working with companies who are starting to figure out their sustainability journey and strategy is it's very important to understand how you're going to tell the story and what kind of data you can provide to prove that story. There is so much greenwashing happening in the industry. It's very hard to gain trust on the subject. So the sooner you understand what kind of data you need at the end of the journey, the sooner you can start figuring out how to collect it and how to collect it in a way that's actually trustworthy. Yeah, but speaking of greenwashing, if we still have a couple of minutes, Lubomila, I'm curious to hear about your experience with companies telling their story, and maybe what are the most common, how does that happen, basically? Why do you think companies end up greenwashing us?
Yeah, before I answer the question, I want to make a comment to what you were saying earlier, because I can even see in the audience some people that are justification of why sustainability happens in some companies and why it doesn't. I think it's quite of a lonely battle if you're quite early in the process and your company is not necessarily awake for the importance of that. And it gets even more complicated the bigger the company is and the more bureaucratic it is. And we've gone through the process now of working with like a few hundred companies. And what is really interesting to see is that probably we have kind of maybe 40% of them coming through employees. And actually, these are the biggest soldiers on the planet, because they end up basically battling their way through the system to implement something that is not necessarily accepted or even approved by in terms of budgets and so on. So for anyone that is listening in the audience, don't worry, because there's plenty of good examples that I can give, and I don't want to name companies, but we've seen it multiple times. So happy to also connect people who are in the same mindset, because I think, it could feel quite challenging, but the truth is that this is the sweetest win at the end when it actually happens, because you have been able to change a massive company or even a small company with your own efforts, even if it's not part of your KPI. So, I know, Kristine, you went through the same journey yourself, and I really kudos for that, because it's not easy. And I'm sure it's something that probably, requires a bit more attentiveness. In terms of the greenwashing, which is a totally other end of the spectrum story, it's quite of a sad phenomena that unfortunately over the last few months and years has increased in frequency, and you see it a lot more often, just because there's a lot more activity on sustainability. And a few examples for those that are not familiar of this phenomena that kicked in the 70s with hotels asking people to not put their towels on the floor to save water, which is technically true, but the hotels were basically doing it for different reasons. Basically, what a few examples are of that is companies claiming carbon neutrality without calculating their full scope 1, 2, and 3. For those of you that don't know, scope 1, 2, and 3 are the way emissions are calculated, looking into your facilities, the energy you consume, which is scope 1 and 2. And then scope 3 is the third parties, the suppliers, the purchase goods and services, investments, and commute, travel, data centers, and so on. In an example of an industry, in the automotive industry, 98% of emissions sit within scope 3. So you can imagine how complex it is. So there's oil companies that claim carbon neutrality on scope 1 and 2, which probably is not necessarily the truth. There's also a lot of other companies that don't necessarily go through the utter quantification of their emissions, yet buy offsetting credits and again claim carbon neutrality. That is also greenwashing. Greenwashing is also creating a green line of clothing in a fast fashion company that 99.9% of the money that they make comes from making polyester clothing, but then basically they all of a sudden have this conscious line and everything is fine. And so on and so on. Without maybe continuing into it, I can give examples for every single industry. Um, where it goes wrong and how, like, I think companies can prevent from doing it is just like, if it's too easy, you probably have done something wrong. And this is maybe like not the most positive answer that I can give you, because you're probably hoping to achieve sustainability fast. But if it has been super easy for you to like figure it all out, then probably there's something wrong with it. And it's not because some companies are faster than others in calculating emissions. I have a full-fledged scientific team in-house where there's like 10 people only dedicated to science, and they're super fast. Like, we can come back with a life cycle analysis of a really complex product within days, but being able to get the company to be sustainable, it's another level of challenge, because obviously you need to change something. The calculation itself is not enough for the company to be able to claim the sustainability level that they want to achieve. So where it goes wrong is if a company thinks that just by doing the calculation, they've done something good. Just by buying offsetting credit, they've done something good, and that's more than enough. And essentially, there's a lot of kind of, achievement with very little result. I think maybe just a small comment on what can really give you instant gratification about your sustainability efforts if you involve others in your own journey. Totally okay if you haven't figured out how to calculate fully scope 1, 2, and 3 because you're not working with a scientific team to do that. But if you start informing your employees, your customers, and your other stakeholders that you're taking this journey, and you're also saying like, we're going to take this first step of maybe like removing plastic packaging out of our clothing or out of our, bike or something like that. That's a good first step. And then the second step could be, we're now moving on to like removing all the negative impacts that we have on an employee level and so on and so on. And that basically is a lot more of a clean, human, and also honest way of going through your sustainability efforts, rather than trying to make these massive claims of, okay, now we're all carbon neutral, just because the problem in the way that it is being created, with a lot of negative impacts and bad choices that we have made for our planet, it needs to be essentially cleaned up in the same way, with a lot of little small efforts that are going to organize all of our economy around a more sustainable mindset. So with this monologue, I hope I clear out where greenwashing comes from, which is a huge problem, and it really needs to be looked at with detail.
Exactly. And I think companies not always necessarily are greenwashing because they are evil. Not all people working for corporations are bad people. You can quote me on that. I think it many times happens due to lack of knowledge or understanding of the subject. And sometimes it can also happen just because of the bureaucracy or the corporate layers, when you just have to deliver the story. And sometimes there is not enough data to prove it. What I do suggest is always to look for ways how to support the communicators and the marketers within the team, and just make them aware of the fact that when you're talking about these topics, you have to be very much aware of how to talk about them. And as Lubomila already mentioned, telling the story in a way that represents the steps that you have actually taken, but not overselling them in a way that, so we have removed this one plastic bag from our packaging and now we are green and perfect company. It's not really how it works. It does take a lot of work. Sometimes just kicking off sustainability can take a couple of months. Sometimes it's it can be half a year. And then to see the first results, it sometimes takes a year even. I see that we have a question from Gatis, so maybe let's see. Gatis, Gatis is saying, what role you consider to play in the development of sustainability ISO 14001 environmental management system certification?
Thank you so much for this question. We are actually involved in the creation of some of these ISO standards and also GIN standards, which are the German, basically, the subsection of these international standards. With the ISO 14001, we have not created it. We actually build our software according to it. So that basically is kind of, we're benefiting from the knowledge that has already been delivered in order to allow for our clients to be essentially covered by it. Our platform is also certified by TÜV, which allows us to essentially be, again, allowing our clients to use the platform for official reporting. So if you're a publicly listed company, or if you're a company that has to report to their investors, be it on ESG or just on carbon accounting, we've covered this by taking certain steps to enable the platform to do this without you having to go through third-party certification.
Thanks, Lubomila. There is one more comment/question from Björn on the greenwashing. So companies just do greenwashing because they are not really customer driven, but business driven, I tend to think. So we do need focus more on customer journey and UX to address it. In other words, it's all about the organizational, experimental culture that you are talking about.
Listening to the question, I'm assuming that Björn is connected to the topic of UX, maybe on a professional level. Definitely, I think how we design our products and also how we design our processes in a company really defines the outcome for our clients, because they end up thinking in the way we've gotten them to think. So certainly what you're saying in terms of greenwashing could be influenced if you are taking someone through a journey that is really exhaustive. Just a few examples, like, from the CO2 emission perspective, 5 clicks is definitely a lot more exhaustive than 1 click. So if you're a bad UX designer or someone that basically takes people through a very complex process, probably you would be ending up with something that is bad for the environment. Also, complex designs and things that are quite heavy on the visuals and maybe complex kind of setups does not allow for easy to use websites, which again is also quite heavy on the CO2. Yeah, that's kind of maybe on the website side, but on a more fundamental level, I think it's definitely about how we build organizations and what kind of values we embed into them in order to engage these different clients and stakeholders to think in a sustainable way. Because at the moment, how our systems are optimized, it's optimized for efficiency and for making more money, rather than actually making less exhaustive processes.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Lubomila. I do see that we are running out of time, so we will wrap up this time. And I just want to say that, first of all, thank you so much all for tuning in, for getting inspired, for chatting with us about such an important topic. But I hope that you're not only inspired or you have spent a nice coffee break with us, but you actually learned something, and that this will inspire you to take action. Because as PlanA would say, there is no plan B for planet. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and have a nice rest of the day.
Thank you so much, Kristine. And for anyone that wants to connect or learn about business sustainability, feel free to connect on LinkedIn.
Ditto. All right, take care. Bye.